using my phone, so let me see. Hopefully these are working, and you'll get. Okay, so let me get a quick check. Yep. So the sound is working. Um, Chat filter has everyone's messages visible to me. So unless you are trolling, I will, see your messages. And if things get out of control, I'll just make it subscriber only. But I always like to start off fairly, unless I have a guest on. Then I like to proceed with caution for their benefit, not for mine. Make sure everything is. Make sure my cloud bot is active. Looks like my cloud bot is active. So, what's up, everybody? I'm continuing my discussion from yesterday, where I was basically, what's up, Carlton? He said, "Salute, just a contrarian in chat." So yesterday I was making the claim that a lot of people on the political left have mental health problems, and I wanted to make sure that it wasn't a that there wasn't a false equivalency, um, because it's not the same on both sides. I acknowledge that both people on the radical left and on the radical right both suffer mental health issues, but my further point was people in the mainstream left disproportionately have mental health issues as well, which is not seen on the mainstream right. So when I say mainstream left, I'm talking about uh, you know your liberals, your moderate progressives, um, those sorts of folks. The mainstream right would be, um, conservatives, libertarians, um, moderates, because moderates would be now considered right wing, as according to the left, but whatever. So moderates, conservatives, libertarians don't tend to suffer disproportionately mental health issues like those on the left. Coop FN3 says hello. What's up? Alino underscore 22 says hello, sir. How are you? I'm fine. Um, so yeah, so again, yesterday I was making a claim that a lot of people in the mainstream left uh, suffer political obsession disorder, and has lead them to have absurd claims, like the fact that they think that that assassination attempt on Trump yesterday at the White House Correspondents' Dinner was staged. Like, nothing about that looked staged, but this is where we are. So I'm doubling down on that today and saying the same people who try to tell you that there are multiple genders and that you can pick your own gender are the same folks who want to tell you that the Trump assassinations were all staged, like the one at the rally 2 years ago. That was staged. That the one when he was at the golf course, that was staged. The one this weekend was staged. Like, really? Like, they're not dealing in reality. Or like there are no kings protests. This is stupid. Who are seeing? Are they? They're seeing kings? Are they seeing kings now? They're seeing kings. Carlin says the guy was running like the Flash past security. Yeah, and then it's and this is a guy who you wouldn't even who doesn't fit the bill, right? He was a teacher who received Teacher of the Month, who like who thought it was up to him to try to kill the president. Like, and this happens because again, people on the mainstream left are so deranged that they think our president is Hitler and everyone who follows him are fascists or Nazis. So the only so the logical so the rational consequence of thinking in that manner is that we have to take him out, right? And that's bizarre. And like like I said, so this is why my secondary claim yesterday was that I think that political obsession disorder needs to be its own category of mental disorder within the DSM, going into either the DSM-6 or the DSM-5 text revision. The DSM standing for the diagnostic um, stati- um, the diagnostic statistical manual for mental disorders. It's in this fifth version, but I don't think they've done a text revision yet. So I think in the text revision, they need to revisit things like political obsession disorder and put it in its own subcategory, um, related to anxiety disorders and obsessive compulsive disorders, in which people are usually categorized under when suffering like political obsession. They usually are people usually diagnosed with things like anxiety disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, or some sort of mood disorder. But I think political obsession disorder needs its own category. And then the other thing I think that needs to be revisited in the text revision for the DSM is um, autism spectrum disorder. I don't think it. I don't think the way it's considered a spectrum is helpful anymore to people. I think they've made the spectrum way too broad to encompass people who do not have autism but are just people who are maybe very socially awkward and can use some social skills training. So I think the DSM is need of either a text revision or a whole new version 6. Um, Carlin says TDS is wild. I mentioned the name Trump to someone and they literally started growling. Jesus Christ. Yeah. And so, like, I've acknowledged to, like, because people on the left will say, well, Trump derangement syndrome isn't a real disorder. I will acknowledge that. But Trump derangement syndrome is just a specific manifestation of political obsession disorder. Because we did see, let's, we can be honest, right? We did see, uh, like 13 years ago, the political right doing the same with Obama. Like they they had some Obama derangement syndrome as well. They had ODS. So, like I said, the Trump is just their hatred of Trump is just a manifestation of their political obsession disorder. And so it can be. It doesn't have to be a specific political leader, and it doesn't even have to come from a specific alignment um, within in politics because political obsession disorder can come on the left and on the right. Like I said, on the right, we saw this 15 years ago with their obsession with uh, Obama. We saw the rise in militia groups. We saw All and all these people now wanted to be part of the everyone wanted to have their little bug out bags and, and stuff like I have my bug out bag, but still like everybody was a doomsday prepper under Obama, right? So yeah, I mean it comes in flavors, but political obsession disorder is just that, political obsession, and that can be the case regardless of who the fixation is, uh what on like which leader the fixation is on. um Carlton says the ODS people didn't try to unalive him, that I can remember. The, true, to a point. There were some attempts, but not like there was no like I will give you that. There were no like hardcore attempts on his life the way there have been on Trump. The way the people on the right obsessed about him was they they just thought that they thought under Obama the country was going to fall apart, and they were ready to either they were ready to grab the guns and bug in, or, or form militia groups and like it so I so nowadays I can't trust the data coming out the Southern Poverty Law Center, because we know about their bullshit now. Like the same people, the same hate groups they were telling us to watch out for, they were fucking funding. So I want to be careful with the data coming from the Southern Poverty Law Center. But I will say that there was data at the time showing there was a palpable rise in militia groups and you know in the rise of uh the there was a lot of like deep seated racial tension at the time. Um, but you're right, there weren't these multiple attempts on Obama's life like there was on Trump. He's only been in office less than 2 years, and there's already been three attempts. The first attempt was before he even got into office. So yeah, it's crazy, man. Um, and then these foes are saying it's fake. I'm just gonna say this one time. All of you folks sending fucking shit in the chat room, they got shit to do with my conversation. I'm ignoring the fuck out of you. If you're not gonna if you're not contributing to the conversation, I'm ignoring the fuck out of you. I don't give a shit about the NFL or anything else you guys are talking about. Stop asking dumb shit. This is not asking me anything. I'm doing a topic today. That's it. Anywho, um, so yeah, but it's just funny. This like the same like so the and like I said, there's some people want to make a false equivalency saying, well, people are they're political hobbyists on both sides that are obsessed about politics, and it's not the same. There's only one side this disproportionately shows a uh, a preponderance of mental health problems, and it is the left, the mainstream left, not the radical left, the mainstream left. Harness says people making these attempts are always skinny with no muscles. No one looks like Jack Reacher or The Rock doing this stuff. LOL. Yeah, because the left, there's no masculine men on the left. That's why. That we know why, Carlton. There's no masculine men left on the left. They've pushed they've pushed masculine men away from the Democratic side. If you are they consider they consider traditional masculinity toxic. So yeah, there's no masculine men on the left. So even these little faggots trying to shoot the president look look like a bunch of fanooks. Like they don't look like manly men. They look like that dude look like he sucks dick. Like I'm sorry. And the last guy who tried to take him out was some Peter Puffer. No. I'm sorry. That was Charlie Kirk's assassin. Charlie Kirk's assassin was a straight up Peter Puffer. And this guy, I bet you will find out he's a goddamn Peter Puffer too. Um, Chaz is back. Maybe he says, "Have you ever voted for Trump?" Yes, I voted for him in the last election. My regrets is that I didn't vote for him in the last in 2016 and in 2020. But I did learn eventually. I did learn. I had enough of Democratic bullshit. I had enough of black women's bullshit, and I had enough of liberals bullshit. The three of them, those three groups, um, the Democratic elite, white liberals, and black women, made it that I will not vote Democrat ever again. So you damn right I voted for Trump. Like I said, there's no masculine men left on the left. There are men on the left, but they aren't masculine. You do have a whole bunch of old black men on the left trying to shame younger black men who are more conservative and more likely to vote uh, Republican or be an independent. But yeah, I mean, these folks will tell you that there's multiple genders. They will tell you that you can choose your own gender. They will tell you believe all women. And again, I already showed how ridiculous believe all women is. Like, if people didn't see my short from last week, where I pointed out that Katy Perry apparently sexually assaulted the lesbian actress who used to play Batwoman on the CW back in the day, and now she's filing charges against Katy Perry. Katy Perry saying I didn't do it, and I'm like, well, if you believe all women, which women are I supposed to believe? Because Me Too. So should we go with the lesbian actress from Batwoman who's saying Me Too? I was assaulted by Katy Perry. She she claimed that Katy Perry, you know, removed her panties and rubbed her vagina on the actress face, and the actress was disgusted by it and threw up. So Katy Perry may kiss the girl and liked it, but that girl didn't like it. Carlson says, I grew up and it was only male and female, as it still is, bro, as it still is. And people are saying, well, that's a social construct. Whereas, and then they lie about it. The gender ideology is completely rationally incoherent. Like they try to have it both ways. So first they try to tell you genders the so you have okay, so you have some who are more rational than others. Some will say, okay, there's biological sex is it is fixed and it's only two of them. But then they say, well, gender is more binomial, where it's still two, but it's more of a range. And I might buy that. But then the other ones say no, it's multiple ones. And they say it's like 20, 30 of them or whatever. And then they also say you can choose them. And then they try to go back and say, even though gender and sex are different, then they try to use gender in place of sex and do the little switcheroo and think you're not supposed to catch it. Like when they say, well, biological sex is assigned at birth. You can't have it both ways. Or or they say, the sex is a, biological sex is arranged too, blah 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 blah, and it's disingenuous. It's just disingenuous. We know that there's something biological about gender, and to say that there's multiples, no. And then they say you can choose them. You can choose your own. And they're not dealing in reality. They push ideology. They will let their ideology trump reason, including trumping good science. And it's just no. This is where they started losing a lot of people, because a lot of people like myself who consider themselves to be moderate progressives just couldn't buy into the gender ideology, the push the push for like fourth wave feminism, um, much less third wave feminism, which is still incoherent, um, or the just it's just whack, and it's like I don't get their rationale. Like there are rational people on the left, don't get me wrong, but it's just I don't think you can be a masculine man and still be on the left without facing some serious cognitive dissonance. Cardinal says they want people sexually confused. Yeah, the problem is they haven't worked out their own ideology. So not only are they confusing other people, they're confused as well, but they want to pretend that they know what they're talking about. Like they can't even define what a woman is. They get befuddled and think you're trying to set them up with a trap when it's a very easily defined thing. They just don't. They just want to resist the common sense definition. Um, and then they try to, and then they try to play uh, semantic games with biological sex and try to confuse people who, because most people are scientifically illiterate, so a lot of these people have been in these uh, have taken these gender courses, and they learn how to say shit in a way that will confuse normal people, that they can't respond even though they disagree with gender ideology. They'll say, well, yeah, but modern biologists now say this about sex, so what people were saying about biological sex in the past is wrong. No, no, biologists still largely agree when the definition of biological sex has been defined for over 100 years. It's just that these people will find a few radical left um, biologists to that they can use to bolster their own views, whereas the majority of biologists do not agree with this bullshit. Like they know that sex, um, biological sex has been defined for over 100 years. This uh, is biological sex is fixed and is two and is defined by the size of the gametes. Large gamete female, small gamete male. Like this has been defined for over 100 years. So they try to confuse you with talk about chromosomes and making and pretending that certain uh, genetic uh, sexual disorders are common when they're statistically rare occurrences, and you don't define things in science by statistical rare occurrences. You define them by the generalities. It's like saying we would define flipping a coin to be heads, tails, or on the or the edge, because there's a very small probable chance that if you flip a coin, instead of it landing on heads or tails, it might land on the edge of the coin. But that is so rare of an occurrence that we don't factor it into a coin toss. Same thing with uh, these rare developmental sexual disorders. They are so rare that we don't use them to define a biological sex. But if you listen to these people, and if you have no background in scientific biology, some of the stuff they say might be convincing. Sort of like how people try to confuse people talking about evolution back in the day, um, with intelligent design. And if you, again, if you didn't have any background in evolutionary biology, you could be easily confused by these intelligent design proponents who also who tended who sometimes had biological training, that they would use what they knew to confuse people, despite evolutionary biology already being very well defined through law like observations. Sort of the same thing. People with an agenda will try to misconstrue science, particularly the life sciences like biology, to bolster their own, their own little political social views. Uh, Carlos says the Democrats promoting rainbow activities to children was the last straw for me. Exactly, man. So I don't know which was the last straw for me. It was because there was so many things. One was, yes, forcing, forcing LGBTQ um, ideology in public education. That was a no go for me. That was one. I think as a I think as a combat athlete, one of the biggest ones for me, though, since I don't have kids yet, was them trying to convince people that it's okay for biological males to be to be fighting women in sports in things like boxing and MMA and Muay Thai. Like, no. Like, we remember the Olympics, the dude looking like fucking King Xerxes from 300 fighting women in boxing. In his first match with the one woman, he hit the female boxer so hard, she busted out, she just started crying and quit the match. And now they're acknowledging that, yes, he is a biological male. Now they're acknowledging that 4 years later. The motherfucker looked like Xerxes. Like, he looked like he was ready to take on all of Sparta, and claiming he was a girl. Like, the fuck? That to me was like one of my breaking points right there, was when they were trying to convince people that biological males were still women and competing in boxing and in fucking power lift and Olympic lifting. I'm like, really? And it was funny because just 2 years before that happened, there was a joke on South Park with like someone look with basically it was like Macho Man Randy Savage talking about, oh yeah, I'm a woman, blah 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 blah. And he was like supposed to be a like a lifter, like a power lifter, and then it actually happens in the fucking Olympics. I'm like, oh my god, so reality is mirroring art. Crazy. That was the two things. Um, what was the third thing? The third thing was trying to convince black people that they need to be out there, like, protesting for immigrants who are stealing that, taking the natural resources that black people have been asking for years, giving them cheap housing, giving them all sorts of like benefits through SNAP and EBT, like $10,000 in food and cash benefits, um, putting them in the inner city. Uh, letting them just run loose with like Latino gangs and stuff. Like it was just so the trying to tell people that we should be okay with illegal immigration, especially when those illegal immigrants were being pushed in black communities. I think that I think that pushed me over the tipping point. I think that I think that pushed me over the tipping point right there. But yeah, Carson said they're trying to outsmart nature. Nature always wins. Yeah, I mean, they, they think they think they could keep up by doing this gender affirming care, and when I kept saying like if gender is such a social construct, then why do you need biomedical treatment for it? Then they oh the all the rationalizations come out then. Well, it's not all surgery. You just being you're being unfair. You're acting like they're all undergoing surgery. Not everyone does surgery for gender affirming care, but it's still a biomedical treatment. Not all of it is surgery. I acknowledge that. Not everyone's getting their dick cut off. Not everyone's getting their tits cut off. But some, I was like, what about the hormone? No, no, not everyone takes the hormones. Okay, but why for gender affirming care are they going to see a physician? If it is a social construct, should they rather not be going to see a psychologist or counselor of some sort? Why do they need to see a physician or a cosmetic surgeon for gender affirming care? And why are you trying to convince us the little kids are already convinced that they were born in the wrong body? So I think they're fucking ridiculous. But these are the same people who want to convince us that MAGA's evil, Trump is Hitler, all Republicans are fascists, um, that masculinity is all toxic. Or they try to redefine masculinity. I had some one bitch we went on like we went out once and it never happened again. Like trying to convince me that um she was like, well, that's just toxic masculinity. I was like, there's no such thing. I said, there's toxic people. She was like, well, there's no toxic femininity either. I was, she thought she got me. I was like, yes, I agree. There is no toxic femininity, just like there's no toxic masculinity. There are toxic people. I was like, most people who talk about toxic masculinity don't even have any background in psychology to be talking about it. I was like, you guys are just using buzzwords. Uh, on top of that, and then she was trying to say, well, you using a very restrictive sense of masculinity because words have meanings. Yes, I'm using a yes, I'm using a narrow scope of masculinity because you can't just you can't just use the term and make it for anything that you want. That's not how it works. Uh, Clara says newer studies show gender dysphoria is typically grown out of left alone. Is grown out of if left alone. I don't have I don't know about those studies. I can't confirm nor deny that. I will say this that transgenderism seems to be more there's more evidence growing that transgenderism is mostly a social contagion by folks who are probably just gay or lesbian and they suffer from gender dysphoria um, or some other underlying mental problems like depression and bipolar disorder, stuff like that. Um, but but that is a thing that a lot of people the problem with going doing these biomedical treatments to so-called treat the gender dysphoria are not a good idea, because then you might be living with regret that you've permanently mutilated yourself, and you don't even feel the same as you did back when you did it, but you were being convinced by others to do it because because of the social contagion nature of transgenderism. Carlin said, I heard someone say lifting weights is toxic masculinity. Oh, I'm not surprised, bro. Do you remember during the pandemic they were trying to convince people that that people who want to go to the gym are Nazis. Being like they were, and that's because you look at how many people are. Like I said, there's no masculinity on the left anymore. It's a bunch of little Peter puffers, a bunch of fat women with blue hair and septum piercings who think they're still who think they're still attractive just because they're desperate guys who will still fuck them, and they get the false impression that just because some loser wants to fuck them that they're attractive. A guy will fuck anything. That doesn't mean that they're attractive. And these women think they're built uh like what's the little character from McDonald's? Grimace. They're built like Grimace, hair colored like him, and eat the same food basically, and think they can talk to men any kind of way because some guys somewhere out there online on their hinge profiles willing to fuck them. Um, and these little fat bitches and these little girly ass men with 2-inch dicks are were going around talking about, oh, these people who want to trying to be physically fit is fascist. Really? All right, then I'm fascist then, because I'm not going to stop being physically fit because you feel some sort of way about being physically inadequate. So you want to mind, so you want to try to brainwash everyone else who is healthier and fitter than you. There must be something wrong with them because they pride taking care of their body. These people are retarded. Connor says transgenderism is leading to transhumanism. Um, so that gets into like what we were talking about the other day with, I was talking about the episode The Splicer on Batman Beyond, when the teenagers were splicing their DNA with animals, to look at to look like uh anthropomorphic animals. Um, I don't know about the transhumanism thing, but it did lead to more of an. The funny thing is, one of the things that people thought was a reductio argument or a reductio ab absurdum, reducing something to absurdity, was when people were saying, well, if people think transgenderism is okay, then transracialism should be okay too. And back then, I remember 13 years ago, people was like, that's absurd. No one's going to take the fact that just because people can be transgendered, that they can just arbitrarily choose their own race. Then then comes in Rachel Dolezal. This bitch. She she's still like, she doesn't even go by Rachel Dolezal now. She's given herself a Nigerian name. If you think I'm joking, go. She done a recent interview on Ask a Brother podcast with Jeff St. James. I recommend his channel. She did a whole interview with him. She now goes by a Nigerian name, and you should hear the pathetic like excuses she gives for her decision making. The only thing the only thing I didn't like, because I usually like Jeff St. James analysis of things, but I disagree with how much like he was doing a little too bit to comfort her in her irrational thought, like her irrational decisions and judgment. Like, no, like he was saying, well, I don't. He was saying he didn't consider it that radical, looking at a bunch of other stuff that he mentioned. I'm like, nah, no, no. But I still recommend his channel. Like I can disagree with him on some things and still overall agree with him on a lot of other stuff. Same thing with Kevin Samuels. I disagree with him on a few things, but by and large, I agree with him on a lot of other stuff. Um, in any case, the transracialism has become more accepted. But just like transgenderism is mostly men trying to pretend to be women, transracialism is mostly white people trying to pretend to be colored people. There was one guy who was saying, I remember this one little retarded white guy was claiming that he was now Asian, Filipino, in fact, and said he wants to now be called by the name Tuk Tuk. I'm like, what is? I was like, I know he's retarded now because first of all, Tuk Tuk is a name of a as a name of a vehicle you would get somewhere like in Thailand or Cambodia or India or Vietnam. Not in the Philippines. In the Philippines, you would get something like a trikey or a jeepney, not a tuk tuk. Tuk tuks don't exist in the Philippines. They have trikeys instead. So I was like, okay, he's dumb. And then again, we have people like Rachel Dolezal. And then look at Bad Baby. Like, she swears she black. I mean, I don't think she's come out and actually say that she's black, but she and a few other little female white rappers have basically just taken cultural appropriation to exponential levels without actually calling themselves black. Like Iggy Azalea was, obviously the forerunner of that. She left rap and went to OnlyFans. I think her OnlyFans ain't even popping anymore. Bad Babies was. As soon as she turned 18, she went on there and got a bag. And then she tried to shame all the men that came on there to give her that money, saying they were all, PDFs and stuff. Like, word. But first of all, illegal now. Two, they're rich. You're rich because of them. Like, but she's kind of retarded anyway. That's why I didn't feel bad for her when she's with this boyfriend that beats the shit out of her. I could care less because she tried to, she tried to, she tried to shame so many men in her DMs and all that sort of stuff. Anywho, my point is transgenderism made it more acceptable for transracialism, even though that was seen as a reductio argument that was being unfairly used against transgenderism 13 years ago when people were saying, well, this is going to lead to people thinking they can just choose whatever race they want to be. And people was like, don't be ridiculous. People can't do that. Then they started doing it. And it just goes to show, no, you cannot pick your gender. No, you cannot pick your race. And with transhumanism, uh, I don't know. I don't know if that. I want to. I want to say that is a poison the well argument. Like I don't like. I don't think it's going to lead to that sort of thing. But I don't know, because like I said, transracialism started to become more acceptable. Like I said, that's why I disagree with Jeff St. James. Like I'm like, stop. Like it seemed to me like he was giving her the green light to go ahead and pretend to be black, like using like he's red pill, or for the most part. So as a red pill type of psychologist, he should have called her out on her bullshit. I'm like, no, you are a white woman. Your parents like aired you out. Why are you using a Nigerian name now? And I don't know what her Nigerian name is. That's why I'm still calling her Rachel Dolezal, because I wouldn't call her a Nigerian name anyway. She's a no. And then she was basically saying so one of the things I think gave her a little made a made people a little bit sympathetic to her was that she was saying, before her parents had came out and outed her as a white woman, that she was completely estranged from her family. Um, and I get that, but still, like I can acknowledge that maybe the parents were just had pulled a dick move by outing her for the fact that she's just a white chick with like Nordic or Swedish roots or whatever. I don't, whatever her roots are. I forgot. She's pretty much just a northern European stock of white woman. But um, you can be sympathetic to the fact that she was estranged from her family. They didn't treat her well without uh, that leading to accepting her wanting to be of another race. Like, no, as much as my family gave me hell, I'm not going to suddenly start claiming to be another race. I might not want to acknowledge them as my family anymore, but doesn't mean I'm going to like just whole like just wholeheartedly just abandon my my race because I can't anyway. Um, and even if I could, it just wouldn't make any sense. Clara says the Carlton always a part of the plan. Liberalism requires something to be liberated from. No. So American liberalism has very has very little in common with its classical roots. I consider myself a classical liberal, but as a classical liberal, I'm now more aligned with the political right. Classical liberalism, as I was talking about yesterday as well, was about political freedom, but that's not acknowledged by the American left or the American liberal anymore. As an American liberal, you are only supposed to be within a small range. You only have to accept uh, certain viewpoints, like a certain agenda, which is antithetic to political freedom. You can't have. They don't like religious freedom because most of them are against organized religion. So you're supposed to be, if not atheist or agnostic, you can be spiritual as long as you don't accept organized religion. Um, they definitely disavow freedom of speech. They say, "Oh yeah, freedom of speech," but not when it comes to hurting uh, protected groups or oppressed groups. That's not how it works. Freedom of speech is freedom of speech. It doesn't mean only when it's not against a protected group like the LGBTQ or um, some racial minority or whatever. No, that's not how it works. uh, freedom of speech means you have like means you're going to offend people. If you can't you if you cannot utter speech that is going to be offensive to someone, then you don't really have freedom of speech. So they don't believe in freedom of speech, don't believe in political freedom, don't believe in religious freedom, and don't believe in economic freedom. They, how much they say eat the rich and all this other sort of stuff. Um, Mind you, most of the people on the left come from privileged backgrounds, which is hilarious. Like they're always trying to talk about what's good for the poor when they never came from those humble roots. Most people on the political left come from a privileged background. Most people who came from nothing tend to be more conservative or moderate. Uh, Plus, they believe in punishing you for your wealth. So it's like it's stupid. The wealthy already pay the majority of federal tax and probably state as well and local. Now, the super wealthy are the ones who get away with, evading taxes. But that is like 0.01, that is the 0.01% of the population. The 1% are like the working rich. They pay their fair share of taxes. simply taxing them more isn't going to help society. There is a, a point of there's a point where that just doesn't do anything anymore. It's going to plateau. I don't want to use statistical words because I always lose people when I use terms, but the keep keep trying to tax the rich is just, you're gonna reach a point where it plateaus and it's not going to do anything. For one, those really wealthy people have the option to just leave the state and go to a state where they're taxed least, or they'll just leave the country. There are super wealthy people who have even given up their U.S. citizenship just so they don't have to pay U.S. taxes anymore. This is a secret of, so I'm giving away out game here, right? So just like you have some wealthy people who will get two, three, maybe even four different passports and live in other countries and pay less taxes. Some of these folks go even farther, especially the super wealthy. They give up their US citizenship just so they don't have to pay US taxes anymore while living abroad. You don't think a lot of these wealthy people will do that? They will. They will get second, third, maybe even four different passports aside from their US passport just to avoid paying taxes here in the country. And some will go the extra length and renounce their US citizenships just so they will never have to pay US taxes. There are several wealthy people who've already done it, and there will be more if they keep trying to overtax the rich. The rich always have options. The people who pay them, like, no, this is not a viable strategy, economically speaking. But then also, I'm gonna keep going. Another thing about American liberals, they don't care about the pursuit of reason anymore. That was another foundation, like foundational value of classical liberalism, because classical liberalism came out of the age of enlightenment. The European Enlightenment and the Age of Reason. This is where the classical liberalism came out of. So one of the things they really took seriously was the pursuit of reason and empirical science. But most of these folks on the left willingly embrace anti-intellectualism. Some of them even say that uh, reason, that the use of logic and reason and evidence is a part of the patriarchy. And then the last thing, democracy. So they pretend to be all about democracy, but look, the Democrat Party is is very comfortable with being anti-democratic when it suits their needs. When Hillary was running for office in 2016 and Bernie was beating her, there were memos, you know, that we found showing that they had made it. They had said that even if Bernie grabbed, even if Bernie won the Democratic primary, they were not going to let him be the Democratic front runner, no matter what. And they largely played the same game in 2020 when he was coming up ahead. So all the other candidates dropped out just to back Biden, so he could get their delegates or whatever, to make sure they beat Bernie. I was a Bernie bro progress. I was a Bernie one of those Bernie bro progressives. So you can say I'm like a disaffected liberal that defected to Trump. I'm not the only one. But yeah, so on top of that, they like, they've already stated like, um when it comes to the Democratic primaries, they will always make sure that it's a non-progressive person. At least back then. I think now they may change their mind on the progressives are more are where a lot of the energy is in the party. And it's or like and it's other things like so many things they have done that's anti-democratic while pretending that they are the ones protecting democracy from Trump, a democratically elected leader. But American liberalism has very little to do with its classical liberal roots, which is what I which is what I consider myself, a classical liberal. Or as I stated yesterday, I'm just a liberal from 1995 when it still made sense. If that for younger people or people who weren't into politics in the 90s, you probably wouldn't get what I mean when I say I'm a liberal from 1995. But if you go back to how people back then used to talk, like Harry Reid, Charles Schumer, and Bill Clinton, how all those people used to talk back in 1995, if you didn't know whom they were and what era that was, and you just heard them speaking, you would think they were Republicans today. You'd be like, oh, these are MAGA. You would be like, oh, these are MAGA Republicans. If you heard these people talking back in 1994 and 1995 and 1996, like, oh, these are MAGA Republicans. No, these were the Democratic liberals of that era of 1995. I didn't change. The liberals changed. I didn't. Liberals went more to the left. I stayed pretty much buoyed in the same place where I was back then. So now I'm considered conservative. But like I said, I'm just a liberal from 1995. Hui. Uh, Carlin says the clarity of the plan is working too. He said, yeah. He said for now, soon the contradictions will have to be answered. No, I mean they're already facing it, Clarence. Like it, I, like I said, it's just so many moving parts to this. I don't know where to, from what point to attack this. Because there was some white dude that got plastic surgery to appear Korean. Well, I believe it. So he basically got epicant. You know how ironic that is that a white dude would get plastic surgery to appear Korean when it's typically Koreans who get eye surgery to look less Asian. if he, Ironically, if he wanted to look more Korean, he should have not got work done to his eyes, because Koreans who are obsessed with cosmetic surgery typically have the double get the double eyelid surgery so that they have less slanted looking eyes, because they call it that. Like it's not something that we know about over here, unless you're involved in the Asian community, with the whole single eyelids versus the double eyelids, and then there's like five different like slanted eye types. So it, it, trust me, like Asians really obsess over this stuff. He'd be more accepted as a Korean, not not try to get eyelid surgery to have to make his eyes look like he has epicanthic eye folds. That's hilarious. It just, like I said, it just shows how fucking retarded white people are who are trying to be transracial, because they just like trans just like men who try to be trans who who identify as trans women will basically just take very stereotypical uh, behaviors of women by just wearing a ton of fucking makeup and wigs and looking like, basically like prostitutes. So do these transracial white dudes or women like Rachel Dolezal will take on very exaggerated uh, looks of another racial group to try to look like one of them. It's kind of pathetic. Like these people need therapy. Like these people need psychomedication, not surgery. Stunner Black Vibes 9266 says horrible representation of what they think black is. Like, yeah. Clara says antinatalists are already saying, quote, we didn't ask to be born, unquote. In 75 to 100 years, the quote unquote liberation of life will be questioned like the liberation of gender is now. Um, I can't say what will be the case 75 to 100 years from now. What I will say is this: a lot of these people who think that they can just socially engineer society are mistaken, because no matter how much they try, human nature falls under the laws of science, which means that, which is another way of saying that psychology is a science. Like, we cannot just, you can't socially engineer human nature as much as we want, because a lot of our of human nature is based in biology. So people can try to do all these things, but as uh, as Carlton already said, nature always wins. People may not. A lot of these people think that human nature is a blank slate, and it's not. Most of human nature is biologically determined. So as much as people want to try to do certain things, um, human human behavior has a way of rejecting that. There's been ridiculous things in the past, and these things become fads and they die out. Think about it. I mean, for one, antinatalism can't really work if it's to be successful, because if these people don't believe in having children and stuff, how are they going to keep their how are the proponents going to keep themselves going without newer people coming along to embrace the view? For antinatalism to work, you need more people to embrace it. But if everyone who embraces it doesn't have children to pass on these views, it doesn't really work. It's sort of like how it's sort of like how silly the view of solipsism is. So solipsism is the philosophical view that there is only one mind. So it's a more radical version of idealism. So in philosophy, idealism is the view that all that exists are are ideas and minds that conceive these ideas. And so solipsism goes even further and says, no, there's only one mind that conceives all these ideas, but everyone is self-convinced that they themselves are that one mind or part of that conception of that one mind. It is like, well, if that's the case, then how do you how we all like wouldn't it be kind of pointless to whether someone agrees or not if there's only one mind having all these ideas? To like, why would you need to try to get others to accept this view of solipsism if solipsism is right? So it's sort of like the antinatalism thing. Like, it's a self-correcting thing, because if anti-natalists don't want to have kids and don't believe we should have kids, then the idea is going to die out with them. So, um, Mo Halali says within Saudi Arabia, the royals are conflicted on how to respond to the situation in Iran. Okay, that has nothing to do with this topic, though, bro. Anyway, Clara says, brother, if you are a classical liberal and modern liberals keep moving to the left of you, that proves my point. No, they keep demanding liberation. I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by liberation, Clarice. Like, I wasn't saying you were wrong necessarily, but I didn't, maybe I misunderstood what you were saying about liberation. What my point is that American liberals aren't really liberals anymore in the original sense of the term. They're just leftists that have become they they embrace more leftist ideas that have become mainstream. Um, and I mean, and you know, this happens. Like people, like the political spectrum shifts. This is why it's hard to say someone's politically in the middle, because the middle is always moving. So what at one time would have been the middle might be now considered right wing, whereas in another time what was considered the middle might have been on more left wing. It, the political middle is a moving target, but today to be moderate is pretty much to be right is to be considered right wing. And like I said, my views 30 plus years ago would have been considered liberal, but now people in the political left, the the liberal of today would consider me a conservative. I don't know if that means they need liberation from something, but I think what you're getting at is that American liberals now practice identity politics. This was not a this like this was not the like this existed back in the 90s as well, but this wasn't the focus of liberalism back then. Like, and because we had political correctness back then, and we made fun of it even now. Like what we call woke today is just the new term for political correctness, and we were making fun of it back then. Like it's like as soon as political correctness came out, like just a few years later, you know, there was a movie mocking it called PCU. They had John Favreau in it, and Jeremy, what was his name? Jeremy, whatever his name is, not Jeremy Renner, if that's what you think, but another Jeremy, pudgy guy. And John Favreau was in this movie called PCU, where they were making fun of political correctness. PCU stands for politically uh, correct university, and you know, it was mocking these ideas, and the people mocking it were the liberals of that day. Those liberals today would be considered conservatives. But when you bring up liberation, I think what you're talking about, if I'm not wrong, is the fact that today to be a liberal, you have to identify with identity politics. And because I don't, this is what pushed me away from pushed me away from that, because you know, up until 4 years ago, I considered myself a progressive. But the two main things that kept me distant from like from a lot of other progressives was, you know, the identity politics and the gender ideology stuff. Those two things were things I could never get with. I couldn't accept identity politics that I had to accept being a victim just by virtue of being black. I just didn't accept that. Claire says, atypical sort of socialist. I consider the petite bourgeoisie as working class, seeing as they still work for a living, but the regular bourgeois are the cosmopolitan enemy. You know you're gonna lose a lot of people talking like that, right? But yeah, well, I get what you're saying. Like leaving college, I was flirting with the idea of democratic socialism. You know, the version of socialism that uh, Bernie Sanders embraces. But I always felt somewhat uncomfortable with that notion because as a kid growing up out of the Cold War and knowing, you know, looking at, history that socialism has always failed in real world tests, I just couldn't embrace it no matter how noble the idea was. Because even though democratic socialism doesn't have the typical pitfalls of the more mainstream socialism, I should say, it I still, because democratic socialism still kind of embraces like I think I could be wrong, but I think democratic socialism still embraces a sort of a market economy of sorts, a regulated market economy, I guess. But I could be wrong. Tyler says those thoughts on antinatalism are exactly what I think. The proponents are tragic, but ultimately that problem corrects itself. Yeah, exactly. He said, I think we agree on liberalism. It was just a semantic issue. Yeah, like I said, I think when you're talking about the quote unquote liberation problem, is the fact that they put identity politics over everything. And and the liberals eat their own. This is why so many people are leaving. Like I said, I was a dyed in the wool leftist at one point. I would consider myself a progressive up until 4 years ago. And it just became too it just became just I was just facing too much cognitive dissonance trying to stay within that camp. Because I think one of the reasons that kept me in that camp for so long was the fact that most of the educated elite fell in that camp. So being from that side of things, someone who's gone on to graduate school and has several degrees, um, I thought, you know, that is my. I thought that to be of the educated elite, I have to be a part of that political tribe, and you know, being that I'm always someone who puts reason above everything else, or I try to. I couldn't I just couldn't square that circle. So I left. I didn't change my views because, like I said, I didn't change my views. I just didn't accept their narrative anymore, which is why now I just consider myself a classical liberal. But like I said, when it comes to what we were, um, I guess discussing, I think the whole liberation thing of American liberals is the fact that they put identity politics over everything, and sometimes it makes them eat their own because they because as a part of that identity politics obsession that they have, um, they're willing to eat their own through purity tests. Like if you fall afoul of one thing, you're not like they consider you a poser. Whereas on the right, if you align with them on one or two like issues that are like really core to them, they embrace you. Like they may disagree with you on almost anything else, but if you agree with them on like one or two main things they're passionate about, they're like they accept you. They don't they don't expect purity, but the left expects like a purity on every issue, and I suspect that a lot of folks on the left are pretending to agree with all of those things just because they want to remain a part of that political tribe, which is how I felt up until 4 years ago, where I felt that I had to that I had to largely agree with everything, at least to some degree, to be a part of that political tribe. Which is funny because, like I said, I remember taking a progressive survey, um, and probably about 95% or so I agree with progressives on most things, but on the things I didn't agree with, you know, a lot of them would see me as not being a true progressive. So fine, I'm not a true progressive. And now that I'm liberated from the liberators, as you would point out that they are always looking for liberation from something. I'm liberated from them, and now I find that when I'm more honest about what I actually believe, I'm not as progressive as I thought I used to be, if that makes sense. Claire says to continue the path of liberalism is to destroy the status quo, which itself was a destruction of the previous status quo. The path demands more individualism and freedom than what is necessary. Well, like I said, they don't value individualism anymore. Like they will claim they value individualism, but only if that individualism doesn't clash with their identity politics. Like I said, they put identity politics over everything. They put identity politics was never part of classical liberalism. Like I said, it was individualism, freedom of speech, political freedom, economic freedom, religious freedom, the pursuit of reason, and democracy. Those were the core values of classical liberalism. Identity politics was never part of it, which is, playing victim. So, um, like I said, so American liberals are liberals in name only, because and then if you're overseas, like I don't know where you're from, but when you're overseas, the term liberal has a different context than it does here in America. Like I said, liberalism, a liberal overseas usually refers to someone of a more conservative nature, as conservatism is defined here in America. Like to say someone is a liberal, in Europe is more is usually referring to someone who would be considered a conservative here. So when I tell people I'm a classical liberalism, I'm basically aligning myself with that more conservative version of the word as it was originally used during the European Enlightenment and the Age of Reason. Not with American liberalism, which is more aligned with leftist politics, particularly identity politics, which is basically just uh, a lot of victimization. Oh, woe is me because I have a vagina, or I'm black, or I'm brown, or I'm Asian, or I'm gay, or I can't decide what my gender is. So, Kai says ultimately I'm somewhere between market capitalism and protectionist market socialism. Semantically, I could agree with communism, but only my version. Uh, yeah, like I said, uh, I mean, I don't begrudge anyone whatever they want to embrace, as far as their social political views or whatever. I just know what works, and I know that communism has failed real world tests, since its inception. That doesn't mean people can't still embrace it. It just means that they have to acknowledge that they hold a view that doesn't work in the real world. Um, and like I said, I think the difference with democratic socialism is that you can still. I think democratic socialists still will acknowledge a market economy, um, but yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna go. It's late now. It's like 8:38. So yeah, that's about it for me. But good conversation. But I'll talk to you guys later. And I mean, if you got any more thoughts on it, you guys can leave it in the comment section. And I might continue this on tomorrow as well. But like I said, we got a bunch of people who think there's multiple genders and you can freely pick whatever one there you want. Um, Meanwhile, in the real world, they deny actual things like the political assassination attempts on Trump's life. This being the third one. So, uh, this country is having a mental health crisis. So I'll leave you guys with that. Clara says, I'm American, but I hold the original definition of liberalism free from the American paradigm, multiply opposed to the Enlightenment. Well, now I'm confused because the original definition of liberalism comes out of the European Enlightenment or the Age of Reason uh, by people like, John, uh, you know, John Stuart Mill, and who wrote a really brilliant um, essay on that on liberalism, talking specifically about classical liberalism. That is, people like Jeremy Bentham, um, so many other folks I can name. But yeah, I don't know. But anyway, take care. I'm out. Peace, guys.